Have you ever wondered why the rich get richer and others don't? Could it be that a small percentage of the population seek out others to find, study, and execute on legal loopholes that exist within our financial life and make it easier for them to prosper? The answer is a resounding yes. This is the Secrets of the Wealthy podcast with John Mintz. John has spent a lifetime researching and mastering the financial loopholes that he believes should be available to everyone. Join us as we explore different strategies that help you get farther faster towards building and enjoying a prosperous retirement.
Hello and welcome to the Secrets of the Wealthy with John Mintz. If you're just joining us, we are in the middle of a bit of a series here. John is covering the top 10 questions to ask your advisor, and we're actually on the last few questions, and he threw in a couple bonus questions. But before we get to those, John's going to give a market update, just kind of get everybody up to speed. John, how are you doing, man?
Well, I'm pretty doggone hot today, so goodness gracious. We had this, I don't know how many days in. I moved here from Phoenix in 2011, and I think we had, 60-some days in a row, over 100 that year, and everybody was losing their grass and everything else. So I thought, man, I hope that never happens again. Well, here we go again. I don't know how many days in a row we had over 100, but looked out the next 2 weeks, and we're still going to be over 100. So I'm just going to jump in my pool and try to enjoy it.
Seriously, you can either turn the color of a lobster by being in the sun, or my fear is that you're going to jump in that pool and become a lobster because it's going to boil you. I mean, that's hot, man. It's super hot. Yeah. Well, be safe. I know that you're keeping your family safe down there too. But let's talk about the markets. I mean, that's safe, right?
Well, I guess it depends on one's perspective always, right? But, the markets have gone into a little bit of a sideways motion since we last spoke. And that's to be expected. I have these things I call false rallies, where in a bear market, it'll look like the market's trying to rebound only to tease you and then drop again. And that's happened multiple times since this bear started a few months ago now. But I think the thing that is a little bit alarming this week is on Wednesday, the monthly CPI was released. If you don't know what that is, that's a consumer price index, which is generally speaking, it's a broad measure of the price of everyday goods, which includes things like gasoline and groceries and rents and all that. And it rose again 9.1% in June from a year ago, accelerating more than expected to a new 40-year high. Now, if you go back and listen to my previous podcast, I think I say new 40-year high every single time we record. It sounds like a broken record now, but prices jumped 1.3% just in 1 month period from May to June. And that marks the fastest pace of inflation since December now 1981, which is obviously over 40 years. But the other part that if you kind of dig deeper underneath all that, everybody pretty much has probably heard of that by now, but if you kind of dig deeper, and by the way, today is July 15th, the day that we're recording this, and just kind of get an idea of what things are or how they have changed maybe since when you listen to this as opposed to when it's recorded. But there's this thing called core prices, or so-called core prices, which exclude the more volatile measurements of like energy, which is really volatile, and food. But without those even, it climbed just shy of 6% from a previous year. And that was a little less than 1% increase on a month-to-month basis. So long story short, underlying, inflationary pressures remain really strong and obviously widespread. So, price increases were extensive across the board. For example, energy prices are up 41+% from last year, 41%. And so, I'm sitting in this heat, but at the same time, I don't want to turn my hair down. A, because I don't want the bill, and B, because we've been warned that if we don't conserve our energy, we might start having blackouts again here in Texas. So gasoline is up 60% more than it was a year ago, and 11% more than it was the previous month. So, yeah, we've got a little bit of, inflation to deal with. I mentioned this in a little bit different way last month, where I said it's now costing consumers one month of income. A different way to say that is it amounts to roughly $3,400 yearly income decrease for the average worker, or a family of two, a $6,800 decrease in income. So these are not small adjustments we're talking about, right? That's the difference for a lot of folks of paying their bills or not. So one of the things we do when we do planning is we plan. We make expenses, detailed expenses, a major part of planning, and I think now it's pretty obvious why we do that. Yeah. So that when expenses do change due to inflation, you're able to adjust accordingly. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But that kind of gives us an update. I'm going to break down, and I'll close with this, but give everybody a little bit of a teaser here. My next podcast is going to be, where do the markets go from here? Mm-hmm. Because we kind of forecasted what the markets were going to do back in January and February when we were talking, and knew this was coming. But now that it's happened, where do we go from here? Where do the markets go from here? So I think that's going to be a real popular show next time. So we'll get into that next time. But let's finish out this current one and put the closing touch on this thing.
Yeah, but before we do that, let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. Because like you said the last couple times, you've said, new 40-year high, new 40-year high. Mm-hmm. It's not good, but I'm a little scared about what the next set of years would be. In other words, when you shift from saying we're at a 40-year high to an 80-year high or a 60, I don't know what that next marker is. What is that next marker, John? Do you know?
Well, until the wholesale and producer prices start to regress, meaning what the cost of wholesalers or producers are paying for their goods, until that starts to come back down, we're not going to see any relief. That's just, Finance 101. And so there is no immediate relief in sight, if that's what you're asking. Now, when will that happen? It's anyone's guess. Of course, now the Fed meets again at the end of this month. End of July, they'll meet again. They meet every 6 weeks. So the CPI comes out once a month, but the Fed only meets every 6 weeks. And last time they met mid-June, they raised rates 75 basis points, which surprised the markets, and they reacted negatively. This time, I think about 40% of traders are pricing in a 100 basis points decrease, 1%. Wow. And the rest of them are pricing in about 75. So they're trying to slow this monster down. They just it's a little bit too little, too late, unfortunately. Yeah. So we're in for some tough times ahead. But there are ways to protect yourself and mitigate some of these things, and that's why we have this show and why we talk about it.
All right. Well, let's jump into the questions that people should be asking their advisor, and I'll let you pick up where we left off.
Yeah, so last time we finished up is, how does my financial plan affect my family? That was the last one we talked about. So this is a continuation of that. And the next question I think what you should be asking is ask your advisor, what is your warning sign that tells you it's time to get out of the markets? If someone responds to that question with, well, we never get out of the markets. This is a long-term strategy. So yeah, I guess if you're in your 20s and 30s, you could argue that. Mm-hmm. But if you're in your 50s or 60s, I just think you probably ought to start seeking out a new advisor if that's the case. Because every advisor should have some sort of warning sign that says, okay, it's time for us to get on the sidelines here, or time to move out of the markets entirely. Because as we get older, we should theoretically have less and less at risk of loss, right? And so I talk a little bit about this in episodes 18 and 19, and then I'm going to talk about it at length next time we get together. So I'm not going to give the whole show away today. But in general, if you were to go back and look at the 2008 financial crisis and the drop that corresponded with that, and then if you were to look at the crash after 9/11 in the early 2000s. And then you look at today, all three of those, you would see one thing in common, a common denominator in all three of those. When the S&P 500 index price crossed over the 200-day moving average. And I'll explain this in detail last time, or if you want to go back and listen to those episodes 18 and 19, it'll help you as well. But when it crossed over that every single time in each of those three crashes, it remained underneath that until such time as the bear was over, and then it moved back north of that and stayed above it. Now, that's a very simplistic way of saying it doesn't take a lot to kind of see the direction of these markets and where they're going. Long term, not short term, not day trader kind of stuff, right? Yep. We're talking long term, which is the way most of us invest or, park our money for that reason, right? So anyway, I think you should be asking that question, and your advisor should be able to talk to you about that in a way such that makes you feel comfortable that they're going to be able to maneuver when necessary, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and to me, learning from you, when you're talking over 50, you're just talking about a time horizon, because somebody in their 20s and 30s has time to recover, and we don't know when the markets are going to recover, and therefore somebody who's closer to retirement, they might not have that time because they're going to eventually stop their income, when it comes to, leaving their job. So I'm assuming that's what you're alluding to, and you're going to talk a lot about next time.
Well, I am, but knowing what I know now, they always say, wouldn't it be greater if we could acquire wisdom when we were younger and actually make good use of it for our life?
Yeah.
But if I was playing blackjack, and if for some reason I knew the next 30 hands weren't going to be good, would I just say, well, I've got enough money, I'll just play through it anyway?
I just put my chips on the table.
Yeah, just go ahead and give them up. I mean, why would you do that? It's just not logical.
Yeah.
And I'm talking long term, right? Not short term here. So anyway, I just think we've got to, that was then, this is now. We need to think. We've got a lot more tools at our disposal now, and we need to play the game a little bit differently than we used to. But we'll break that down in detail next time.
All right. Sounds good. What's the next question we need to be asking?
Well, I've written down a question here. How will long-term care affect my retirement, and how do I plan for it? When I ask this question a lot, in fact, funny thing is I want to step back before I answer this question. I had a client in just this morning. They were referred by their parents who was in their 70s, and this couple was in their 40s and their 50s. And I'm asking, like I do all the time, I said, you guys have any questions before we get started? And the wife said, well, what questions should we be asking? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if she really was asking that from the standpoint of really wanting to know, or if she was just going to see how I responded to that. But I was I said, well, here's my podcast. Go listen to the last two episodes. But we did talk through that. But I usually help people during our meetings ask these questions, and I answer them with them because I think it's important. But long-term care is a big one. For example, I had a client in earlier this week, and we were looking at his situation. He's 57, all right? And so if the current monthly cost for long-term care in the state of Texas is about $5,475 a month, $183. Now, that's here, not everywhere. Some states it's even more expensive. But average person needs long-term care around age 80. So based on a 4.35% average increase in the cost of long-term care, he'll need $15,000 and some change a month at age 80 to pay for long-term care. If he needs that for 4 years, that'll be $761,000. So if you're not planning for the possibility that might happen, and it does, it completely erase all your assets, both before or after, before you go in or after you go in. So the question I start asking people is, hey, where do you want to be taken care of, first of all? You want to be taken care of in a home or in your home? And I know most men say, I want to be in my home. But it does make a difference in terms of planning. And then the next question I ask them, and this is the one people struggle to answer, which is, well, what asset do you plan to use to pay for your long-term care when you get there? And you see this look of puzzlement Because if they don't have some sort of plan associated with taking care of that, then they're just going to have to pay for it with an asset. And if that's a taxable asset, which is usually the case, then they're going to need a lot more than $761,000, right? Because that's post-tax. So they're going to need a big number to pay for that. And so it really starts them thinking, okay, I've got to think through and get a plan as to how I'm going to pay for this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a little scary, right? I mean, those numbers are pretty frightening unless you've spoken to a planner, right? So that's obviously the point of this podcast, educating folks and just getting the lines of communication open. So
it is. And sometimes I give people that number and they say, oh, I don't believe that. And I said, well, let me ask you this then. How much University of Texas at Arlington, it's where I graduated, and that's right here in my backyard. I said, how much does it take to send your kid to go to school there right now? And they said, well, I don't know. I said, well, it's about $130,000 for 4 years. $130,000. All right. So I said, I graduated there in 1987. I said, do you know what I paid to go there? They said, no. I said, $4 a credit hour. $4. $4 is how much I paid for an hour of tuition.
Single digits.
Uh-huh. So I said, does that make you maybe believe these numbers a little more? People just don't understand what inflation, how it can absolutely destroy a retirement. And then I think they're starting to believe it now. Because it's actually here, right? So yeah, we do definitely have to plan out for that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you gave me these bonus questions that you're asking or you're telling people to ask, and this is my favorite one, I'll be honest. All right, John, I know we're on number 11. What have you got?
Well, to me, this one's really important because I built my practice around this, but it says, who handles all of my service needs after I become a client? It is huge pet peeve of mine when individual help a couple or an individual, when advisors help a couple or an individual set up an account or set up an investment, and then they're moving on and they never have contact with that individual again. I just don't understand that because that person, they may have a general understanding when they start, but they're going to need help along the way. And so we have built our firm in a way such that that doesn't happen. So we have our main office and then we have a separate service center because we want to know, we want folks to know that we are, white glove treatment, that we're going to be there for when they've got to take required minimum distributions, when they got to change beneficiaries, when they've got to do all those types of things. But most importantly, when a client calls us, we actually answer the phone. And so it's kind of a dinosaur these days. You can actually call and not have to hold for an hour and a half anymore. But so I think I think that's something that most people want when it comes to their money. But if you don't ask that question up front, you may be surprised on the back end. So I think it's really important to ask that for sure.
Well, yeah. And John, I've never told you this story, but I experienced this personally. And it was a situation where one of my buddies got into the insurance game, and I know that that's not the same as an advisor, as far as a financial advisor, but we see the same kind of pattern. Once a quote-unquote sale is done, then they lose interest, right? So my buddy was in the insurance game. We met. We were very early, very young. We bought a couple term policies, which were great. We needed those. My buddy didn't like selling insurance, so about a year later he stopped. It was a 10-year term, and so we knew our account was shuffled over to somebody else. Yeah, we had received their name or whatever in a letter. This is who's got your account now. Okay. Guess how many times I heard from that person in 9 years?
Yeah,
Zero. Well, unless you count the one time that we got a phone call 2 weeks before the policy was up. 10-year policy. 2 weeks. Hey, I'd love to talk to you about what you need and, your family's needs. And, I'd like to help you out. Really?
Yeah.
You want to help me out now? Yeah. Where were you when, maybe my second child was born? Where were you when, you don't know anything about us. You don't want to help us out. Yeah. You want to make a sale, right? Yeah. And sure. Unfortunately, every industry can be like that. And there are people in every industry like that. And that's what I love about what you're talking about with that question specifically, because if they're not willing to handle your cares and concerns, then don't do business with them, period. Right? Which brings us to number 12, your second bonus question, which I think is my favorite. How do you communicate with your clients?
I think better as to it instead of how often. So I think both those are important questions, but very good question to ask. I think the old school way of communicating is, okay, we're going to call you once a quarter and talk about your accounts. And really I think that's more of a conservation effort on a part of advisor than it is anything. So, because usually you have that quarterly call and you're not really talking about anything. It's just, okay, things are still going okay. How you doing? How's the family? We like to be a little bit more specific than that. But so obviously we do podcasts and we send individuals to individual podcast shows that relate to what it is that is important to them or their education they need. We do blogs, we do articles, we do emails that have very specific information in them. One of them right now is that we'll probably put on the tail end of this podcast is guaranteed income. And I think folks right now are learning the hard way in some cases, the need for guaranteed income that's going to exceed your expenses for the rest of your life. Because if assets start to erode, and you're taking, X percent of your asset dollars as income, and now that X percent is a smaller number, now you're having to reduce your income when you need more because of inflation, right? So, so anyway, we do a lot of, we're doing a email campaign right now to clients as it relates to guaranteed income. We hand out books for education to our clients. We send out in the fourth quarter of each year, we do what we call Roth conversion reminders, meaning that we contact all of our clients and let them know if they want us to do an analysis for them in converting taxable assets to non-taxable or tax-free assets to give us a call, and we'll do that analysis. We do require minimum distribution reminders, and I could keep going on, but I guess the theme here is that we take it serious in that we believe that financial planning is not a one-time event, that it's a continuous learning communication process from both sides for us to be successful.
Well, I love that point that you made right in that last sentence, from both sides. Like my story, that insurance guy had no clue about where my life was at, what my job status was, how many kids I had since I signed up for the policy, all that stuff. These are things you and I've talked about before. You want your clients communicating with you saying, hey, look, I've got another child on the way. Or in a lot of the cases with the folks you work with, hey, I've got a grandchild on the way. That's something to celebrate, right? That's something to love and enjoy. And as most grandparents, like I have 3 grandkids, I want to be able to help plan for their education, whatever that looks like. I don't care what kind of school they go to, if they could do a trade school, college, whatever, but that's a desire of mine. So having a financial advisor that's open to that phone call to say, hey, look, I know we have a plan. What does it look like if we start a 529 plan, or what are some of your ideas on how to help fund some college expenses for this child? I want to have an advisor that's attuned to me and my family to be able to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah, I love that. So, and I know you encourage your clients to reach out to you. So I think it's a fantastic thing. Is there anything else we need to cover? I mean, you covered 12 amazing points over the last 3 podcasts. Anything else you want to close with today?
No, this has been a fun one. I'm kind of sad to see it come to an end, but we do need to move on to the next one now. But, I hope that folks go back to this, 2 or 3 different times. Obviously, I'm putting these questions out there and with the expectation that my own, individuals that I work with will ask these questions, because it's important. Like I said, communication just makes it better for both parties. The more we know about you, just like a doctor, the more I know about you, the better I'm going to be able to help you, right? Yeah. And vice versa. The more we tell them, the more they understand and know our belief systems, how we do things, the more we're going to be successful as a team as well. So yeah, it's a double-edged team work activity that I believe is paramount in every relationship. So, but next time we're going to get into, I think it's going to be one of the funnest ones we've ever done, because it's going to be really educational in nature, in that teaching folks how in a very somewhat, I'm going to use the word simple, but easy to understand way of kind of seeing from a long-term perspective how the markets work, and when might be the next time that we can count on these markets moving forward again. I give you a little hint. It won't be tomorrow. Okay. Or next month. It's not going to be next month either. Okay. So anybody that thinks it's going to turn around by next month, I apologize. It's just not going to happen. So.
All right. Well, I guess I'm just going to have to wait till next month, John. Okay. I'm excited. Thank you so much for doing this.
Likewise. Thank you.
You bet. Of course, our last thank you always goes to you, the listening audience. We wouldn't be here without you. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Secrets of the Wealthy podcast with John Mintz. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when John comes out with a new podcast, and that new one's going to be fantastic, it'll show up directly in your listening device. This makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And we humbly ask that you rate this podcast, share it, and write a little review if you could, because that does actually help other people find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at the Secrets of the Wealthy, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Secrets of the Wealthy podcast with John Mintz. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of John Mintz. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.